So hi everybody, it is Erin Reed and we are back doing some fun things all about shells and beach. And I just got back from vacation and I picked up these beautiful shells while I was walking around the beach. And one thing I have done already is I've taken all of them and I've soaked them in a little bit of bleach and some water and then kind of scrubbed them. But the coloration that is on here is what is naturally on here. Some parts of it are very white and some parts have a little bit of something to them. I've also kind of gone through and cleaned them up. The last thing I need to do is just kind of clean up some of the edges here. So for instance, like here's still part of the shell is there. So you just want to kind of go through and just clean it up. We are going to glue these down onto a canvas when we're done decorating them and make this a very shabby chic, beachy feel of a project. So see, like right here, just got to kind of clean this up. If you want to get some scissors out, ones that you just don't really care about, these are my scissors that I've used for all kinds of stuff that I'm not too particular on. I'm just cleaning up what I would call, it's where the two shells, I know these ones don't actually go together, but it's where they bound together to hinge, and it looks kind of funny, and just you're kind of cleaning it up. So I'm going to continue cleaning these guys up, and then I'm going to show you the next step. So we're putting this on a big square canvas and we're going to add some burlap and some other fun things on here. And I'm kind of looking about how to orientate it. And we're going to back these on to, basically we're making them like 4 squares. And I think I like this shell. Now, part of the other reason why I pulled a whole bunch is I was looking at the orientation of the shell. So see how these two, they look like they could go together. So I want them to be apart. And then these two, I think I'm going to make it look like that. So it's a little more symmetrical, or maybe I'll alternate them like this. So they're kind of like that. I was debating if I wanted to use the other two, but I think 4 would look better. If I try to do 6, it just gets a bit squishy. If I had 9, but I don't have 9. So we're going to stick with 4. I think that'll make it just perfect. So I'm going to put these off to the side. They'll maybe back up in case I mess these guys up. First step is I picked out my ColoriQue, which is a new ink that is by Color Blocks and Lisa Marie Jimenez. I think it's Jimenez. And it acts kind of, it goes on any, sorry, I'm trying to clarify this. I'm going to squirt a little bit in here. You can paint this on, and I'm just going to read it to you. Metals, clay, ceramic, glass, wood, and it's very quick drying. So I thought, well, why can't it be used on shells? I think it would look beautiful on shells. And of all the colors, I love the verdigris. I did pull some of the other blue colors because I wasn't sure, but I think I love that greeny. This reminds me of ocean color versus this is just very kind of, I was debating with the turquoise mountain too, but I think I like this color the best. And I am just going to paint it on. Simple as that. See how beautifully this goes on here? So I'm going to paint all of the shells. It just easily goes on here. You could use a dauber, but I like the paintbrush, and just paint it directly on. Get all the little edges. And look how easy that is. One of the other things I like about this is that if you use, let's say, an acrylic paint or something, you would end up gooping and you wouldn't get all the beautiful lines. This nestles in and sinks into whatever you are painting, so you still get all the beautiful, the lines and the curves of the shell, or whatever it is that you're painting. I'm going to need a heck of a lot more. So I'm going to put more in here. I got 4 shells. The shells are absorbing the ink a little bit, which is why I need a little bit more. And I'm using the lines to help guide me. So I'm going to go up and down the lines. And again, I'm not worried about the fact that they weren't perfect looking. They're kind of what I would call, almost looks like they're dirty, but they're not. It's just the way the shell is. But when you paint over it like this, when you cover it up, it looks absolutely beautiful. This is just step 1, and I'm going to speed this up and do the rest of them. They do not take long to dry, and we'll come back and look at them in a minute. Okay, so these things dried up beautifully, and if you did notice, I used my heat gun just to set them, but they are dry. It took basically 5 minutes. They're not cured yet, but they are dried. This just came because I was holding them. Now, I want to do something fun. I'm going to add some pretty gold onto the tips here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some embossing powder, and this is gold sparkle. These are from Color Blocks, and I'm taking the embossing stamp pad. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the embossing powder just around the edges here. Really get in there. And I don't need it to be perfect. I'm coating around the rim. So it's wherever the ink pad, and I know this is going to get a little gross, but that's fine. Wherever the ink pad hits is where it's going to be sticky for the embossing powder to come to it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up, open up my embossing powder, and go ahead and coat. And don't worry about doing too much. It'll all go back in the jar. That's why I'm doing this in my tidy tray. So coat all around the edge, everywhere where I put the gold, the glitter. If a little extra, well, it's the embossing powder. If a little extra gets on there, I'm not concerned. Now I want to tap this. And if I feel like, okay, it's just a little too thick here, I don't want it there, I can rub my finger around. So there's a little bit too much here. And then you're going to heat set it. So now I'm going to move this off to the side, cover this so I don't dump it everywhere. I'm going to do the first one with you, and then I'm going to speed through the other ones. You don't need to see me do it 4 times. And go ahead and heat set this. Now, you know when a gold embossing powder or glittery embossing powder is set, because it looks like it all of a sudden starts shimmering and shining and wiggling all over the place. And that means, and this is pretty hot right now, that means that this is heated up enough to set that gold in place, and no longer does it look like it's glitter. It looks like you've got gold leaf attached to the front of it, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same for the rest. I'm gonna apply my embossing powder to the shell, all around the edges, and then apply the embossing powder. So first the ink, which is basically, this creates the sticky, which bonds this to the shell. It creates kind of like an in-between sandwich, and then heat set and do the rest of them. Okay, so while they're pretty much done, I'm just letting them finish setting up. I pulled some other products out, just some stamps, some inks. I love this color in here. This little pretty, it looks like it's almost a perfect match. Dark brown, a little bit of gold lame, I'm not sure. Here's my canvas. I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. This canvas is from Canvas Core. And then a whole bunch of different types of textures, papers, and just colors that I thought would go really well. Here is a flute paper, or kind of like a cardboard, some burlap. I also have some more canvas, but in loose, and then just a couple of different types of cardstock that I feel like all go really well with this particular color scheme. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to make 4 squares. First, I'm going to unwrap this thing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the backing of all of my pieces this craft cardstock. I just love the look of these on craft. I think it looks really pretty. But I want to make them all about the same size of squares. This is a 12 by 12 canvas, and I'm just going to leave it natural and raw. I'm not going to do anything to the actual canvas. I'm just going to glue things on top of it. So I think I'm going to make my squares, and I'm going to do it first before I ruin this paper, just on a sheet of just white printer paper. I'm going to do 4.5 by 4.5 and see what that gets me. All right, so these are 4.5 by 4.5. You know, I think I'm going to go a little bit larger, but I like the look of the white in there. I think it looks kind of fun to have that white. And what's going to happen is each one of these shells is going to rest. And I don't know if I'm going to do it. I'm still playing with the idea of how I want to orientate the shell. But I think I'm going to leave the white in there, and then I'm going to cut my craft to be just a tiny bit bigger. So I'm going to go, since those are 4.5 by 4.5, I'm going to go 4 3/4. So it just kind of fills in the space a bit more. So now that I know that this is good, I'm going to go ahead and pull these off, and that way I don't mess up my canvas. And I'm just going to work one at a time and decide if I like doing the one, then I will continue making for the rest. So I know one of my shells is going to go in here, and it may either go like this or it may go like that. All right, I'm going to test this dark. It might be too dark, but I'm going to test it on the back. I'm okay with that. Okay, so just a little light line. I'm an inker. But then I'm also going to pull this teal color out of here. I think it's going to match. The cool thing about this is I can actually unsnap and pull one out. So I don't have to do the whole gradient. And now I have a little paint. And I'm just going to, again, I'm going to test it on the back. And I really love that color. So I'm going to go ahead and ink the edge of this And since I'm at it, I'm gonna go ahead and I have this pulled out. I'm gonna go ahead and do all of them. So this is the Renea foiled paper, and I'm gonna do just a tiny smidgen. And so since that was the last, the white size was 4.5, this is gonna be 4.25. And now I'm gonna add in the burlap. So I just keep going down by 1/4 of an inch each time. Now, when you're cutting burlap, obviously this trimmer's not gonna cut it, but I gave it a start, and now I'm gonna go in with my scissors, and I have a guide of where to cut. Okay, so once you have your pieces, I like to give it a little bit of a fringe. I don't like it to look so perfect. So I'm just gonna kind of tear off some of the edges, give it a little bit of some oomph on here, and just give a little bit of a, little trim. All right, next layer up is gonna be the cardboard. And truly, I'm kind of thinking that the layer between the gold and this is just a little too much. I want to add another layer and maybe then one more on top. So I think the cardboard's going to be the in between these two. All right, and the last piece I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to some canvas, and I'm going to go at 3.5. All right, so I can see every layer. It's got lots of texture. I want to add one more little something to kind of bring in the nautical feel of it all. I ended up not going with any of the pattern papers. It just wasn't working for me. I'm like, I want the shell to shine and not kind of hide. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of natural rope. To me, rope just feels nautical. I'm doing a double knot on each side just to kind of make the knot a little bit more reinforced and have a little bit more texture, or a little more length to it, I should say. More volume. Trim it up so the lengths on both sides are the same. Now I'm going to take all this and I'm going to start gluing it up. And for this, I'm just going to use a quick dry adhesive from Helmer to kind of hold all the layers together. You know, I might hold off on doing the rope until after I get everything glued down. So I'm going to go ahead and glue all the rest of my next layers. Okay, so I've gone through and I've glued all these together. And so now what I decided is I'm going to add a little bit of something fun down here in these little sections. So I'm going to go back to my first one. And what I did is I took kind of like a strip of everything. So here was the initial rope. And then I took some fibers from the blue, and I'm going to take a little section, like I cut the canvas a little bit too big, a little piece of the gold, and I'm just kind of bundling it all up with the rope and kind of creating like a little nest, almost like a little bed for everything to kind of rest on. And I'm going to split this up a little bit. So I'm just creating some texture and some frayedness and just some fun in here. A little bit more of the blue on top. There's no rhyme or reason to this. It's all just kind of what it is. All right, so I actually pulled out a different glue, and I pulled out a little bit of some sand and some fun tiny shells and some little beads and stuff. And I'm going to use a sand and glue shell, and the sand I got from a conference a while ago. And you know, it's all sand and beachy, so why not? And I'm going to go ahead and start gluing this down first for the sandy part. And if a little bit of glitter gets on here, I'm not worried. Okay, so this is on here. I need a tiny bit more glue. I am going to use a different glue for the shell, attaching the shell. So I'm just attaching a little bit of glue here and there, kind of looking to see where my shell is going to sit. It's just going to kind of rest on the top of this. And the rule of thumb is always go from small to big. So, or from big to small, sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little fun shell in here like this. I'm gonna add another little guy in here over, oops, little barnacle attached to that one. So just kind of adding in a few little things here and there, just a couple. I love the little sea glass, but unfortunately I don't have a ton that's in that color. So I'm just gonna pull the ones that are gonna work. Just a few little pieces, not much. I don't want to overdo it here. There's also some little pearlescent shells, and I'm going to tuck some of those in. I think I need a tiny bit more glue. And that's also going to be the same glue that the sand's going to stick to. And now I'm going to add in a little bit of the sand, and it's just for wherever the glue is. And it's going to get kind of washed off. And basically you're going to treat the sand like it's embossing powder, and then you kind of shake it off. Whoops, there goes that little guy. Shook too hard. I think think I'm going to add a little bit more sand texture to this. It's just not sandy enough for me. There's a lot in this jar, and whatever, just like embossing powder, it's going to go right back inside the jar when it's done. So I'm just using my finger to kind of spread it around and just kind of get a little bit more. Oh, I lost a little piece of sea glass. I'm going to stick that back on. I'm going to go ahead and glue this guy down. This, I'm just going to use another Helmar product. I happen to have it on my desk, and this is just a craft glue. Sets quickly. I would use more of this, but it's pretty much gone. So we're going to use this glue instead. Go around the edge. Make sure I'm getting, I know I just got a little too much in there. Make sure all the edges have a coat of glue so it will stick down on top of what I got going on. Don't worry about doing the inside. This is completely empty. Nobody's ever going to see it. Flip this guy around and glue it down. And there it is. So this is going to set. I'm just going to kind of lay this off to the side here, and I'm going to go ahead and do up the other ones just like I did with the last shell. I think this guy is toast. And anchor in. I need to make more rope pieces, add my little texture bits, add some more of my shells, a little bit of sand, and then glue the whole thing together. All right, so now that I've finished all my pieces, and if you look, I did something a little different on every single one of them in terms of the shells. This one's got a starfish, this one's got just these shells, this one's got a round one, this one's got a little sand dollar. They all have at least one little kind of pearlescent shell on them. They all have a sand, and they all have some sea glass. The other thing that I did, and I decided to make them all so they're all pointing downwards, look kind of funny the other way. But I also altered which direction. So for instance, these guys are both facing outward, or no, these ones are facing inward and these ones are facing outward. The other thing is the corrugated paper. This one, the lines are going horizontally and this one's going vertically. And then I switched it so that they weren't next. So this is vertical and this is horizontal. So they're all just a little bit different. So it looks similar, but not identical. And it kind of adds to the play of the fact that the shells are just a little bit different. So last thing I need to do is go ahead and glue down my squares and then let the whole thing dry for a while. So I'm just going to apply a good glue. And again, I'm just using the Helmar craft glue. It's a quick dry craft glue. And if it looks pretty centered to your eye, it's going to look pretty centered to everybody. So if you want to get your measuring tape out and your ruler and all that kind of stuff and make sure it's perfect, you can, but I'm going for what looks pretty good just to me. And flip it over, do the last two. And there we go. They just need to set up. Supplies are listed below to where you can find all these products. Please subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye-bye.